What's the best album art that you've run across so far?
The best album art I've come across so far? That is a good question. Now I'm gonna look now with that question in mind of kick-ass album art. Let me find something that pops up. When I started buying records, it was based entirely on how the album art looked. That was all I had to go off, because I started buying music or started listening to music without MTV and without like any kind of visual representation of knowing what the people in the band looked like. So it was really just like, what is that record? You know, what does the cover art say to you? So my first cassette tape I ever got was Def Leppard Hysteria, because that's some pretty awesome artwork, you know?
What was an $8 record just
We have Pyromania
2 years ago?
And High and Dry. These are both pre-Hysteria Def Leppard, but look at the how awesome that artwork is. It's so thought out, you know? And that speaks to like an 8-year-old kid. It looks like a video game, you know? I like how they all have bangs on the back here, all of them, bangs. UK, Germany, France, always really good shows. Italy, there's still like people who are into punk rock and into rock, and it's like interesting how there are like the flip of that too, where there's some American bands that like draw better over there or have a bigger fan base than they do in the US, and it's always strange to see how that works within the punk scene. And there's some areas where it feels like the punk scene moves like 10 years behind or whatever, something like that. I've noticed you have a lot of Conflict records, and I fucking love Conflict, and it's cool that you have a lot of Conflict records. I got a Conflict record here the other day.
You're going through everything. Would you prefer it to be in genre right now or alphabetical?
I think it makes sense for alphabetical in here. It's also like secretly a bummer if you're an artist and you go into a record store and you just like, you want to see it in the rock section, and then you were like, oh, I'm relegated to like this section, the punk section back here. You're bummed then, you know?
We've had a few bands come in over the years, and I always feel bad when we don't have the record, you know? It's, we wouldn't have your record if you didn't sell it to us, because no one distributes it.
Long ago, that was the job of the record label, where if you were a band or an artist and you were going to be like playing a show in a town, then they would call all the local record stores and make sure your records were in stock, so that when you played there in town, people could then, after the show, get your records. That was the idea. You're touring and you're promoting it, you know? Record labels stopped doing that, which is, I don't understand. Well, I genuinely like record stores. I did this thing in Chicago for a year where I was like, you know, I'm really having trouble making friends here in the city, and the way I used to make friends as a kid was to go to record stores, and I'd hang out at record stores and I'd meet people like that. And so I was like, I'm gonna go to every single record store in Chicago and I'm gonna try to make friends. And I did. I went to every record store and I would buy records every time, and didn't meet fucking anybody. Like, no one was friendly, nothing. And it's kind of weird, because, you know, like when I came into your store, not that I'm like coming in like, hey, like, you know who I am or something like that, but like, I know who you are. You own a record store. Like, if I'm a musician and I make records, there should be in turn kind of that recognition of that. I feel like people in the stores in Chicago knew who I was, and if you're a store owner or somebody who works there, that you'd want to be like, hey, cool to see you. Yeah. You know, like, you make records, I sell records, we should have a dialogue or something like that.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, can I take a photo of you in front of the door?
But then I'm like, oh, I'm happy to do that. That's awesome. I'm stoked to support your record store because I'm hoping you're stoked to support my records, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the fucking idea. That's the ecosystem, you know? That's the way it works. I'm happy that the one Weezer record you have is the Weezer record that I wrote a song on.
Which one?
I wrote the song Byzantine.
Really?
Uh-huh. Right there, really small. Laura Jane Grace.
That's great.
Byzantine by Rivers Cuomo and Laura Jane Grace.
That's great. Wow.
Fucking cool, right?
Yeah.
To have a song on a Weezer record. It's not a very good song, but it's still pretty cool. I'm gonna pick out the records that.
So this is
I'm sorry to unfile them from the system here.
No, it's perfect.
Alphabetical, so that's good. And I'm used to like recording records that have really dense like parts in there, and there's like, oh, there's like a hidden guitar line that's happening there, where in order to recreate it, you'd really have to be digging like that. But yeah, I enjoy breaking down stuff like that. I did like soundtrack work for this HBO series in 2020, and it was something that, like, a docu-series that spanned generations, starting in like the 40s to the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. All right, let's talk records. So the approach I took was like, the apocalypse is happening and I've got fucking 10 minutes to go in the record store and grab the records that I can carry out into the street. I don't know how there's gonna still be a record player that works after the apocalypse, but these were the records that I grabbed under that operating scenario. So I figured I would start, oh wait, I got it out of order, start with a double header of something that has been oddly influential over my life and resonated time and time again, specifically with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers and the Traveling Wilburys. My first acoustic guitar was a Harmony acoustic, terrible acoustic guitar, but my first electric guitar was a Traveling Wilburys model electric guitar, and I had never heard of the Traveling Wilburys or anything like that. My dad just got me the electric guitar. And at the time we were living overseas in Italy. Once I turned 18, I ended up moving to Gainesville, Florida, which is where Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers are from. So it was just kind of coincidence that my first electric guitar was a Traveling Wilburys electric guitar, and then moved to Gainesville, where Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers are from. So have had that just kind of crisscrossing through my life. I actually, Stan Lynch, who was the original drummer for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, he had a gear store in Gainesville and would periodically put up old guitars, and he had his original Vista Light that he recorded this record with, sitting for sale in the record store for like $10,000. So no drummer in Gainesville was gonna buy it. But I bought like a 60s Fender Jaguar off of Stan Lynch, and I deeply believe that guitar has magical capabilities. You actually have a copy of Bought to Rot, the record that I recorded that, used that guitar to record, but I was like, oh, it was a drummer's electric guitar. They bought this fucking electric guitar, and I think guitars have souls. And they were like, I'm the drummer, I've got this electric guitar, and that guitar knew, like, I'm in the studio right now with fucking Tom Petty and Mike Campbell, and no one's gonna play me because I'm a fucking drummer's guitar. So it sat in a case for decades, and then it became mine, and I was like, I will rock you, I will use you. So I had to grab some Traveling Wilburys and some Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. I would be remiss to not admit the impact that the Doors have had on my musical taste. I went through an extremely big Doors phase when I was like in the 7th grade, and became obsessed with Jim Morrison and read every single biography that was available to read on Jim Morrison. And I think that their last record, LA Woman, is their best record. Every time I go to Paris, I visit his grave and hang out. Beautiful cemetery in general. Edith Piaf's there, Balzac's there, many other famous graves. But LA Woman, figured had to grab. But recently, for some reason, I stumbled upon this later era Doors record, Other Voices. This was, I'm not sure if this was the first one after Jim died or the second one. I know they did 2 records after Jim died. I thought it was really bold in general that the Doors were like, we're still gonna do a fucking record.
We don't need Jim. Yeah.
Right. And there's a song on this record, Ships with Sails, that's a really fucking tight jam, and I've been listening to it a lot lately, actually. I have it on my running playlist. And I had always kind of written off the later era Doors records. And I think that it's really, really, really important to acknowledge the connection to punk rock that Ray Manzarek has had in particular, in that Ray Manzarek produced at least the first 2 X albums, starting with X Los Angeles. So if you know that record and the sound of the organ on like the song Nausea, that's fucking Ray Manzarek from the Doors. So had a big impact on punk rock in general. And me. Okay, next I chose Wire, Chairs Missing. I love Wire, and I think this is their second LP, and it's not the one that most people gravitate towards. I'm spacing on what the name, Pink Flag is the name of the first one, right? But this one in particular, there's a song on here called Outdoor Miner that is one of my favorite all-time songs. I put out an EP this past September called At War with the Silverfish, which is actually a Wire reference specifically to that song, Outdoor Miner. There's the lyric, an outdoor life for a silverfish, eternal dust, less ticklish. So I don't even know what the fucking lyrics to the song Outdoor and Minor mean, but I was always like, wow, an outdoor life for a silverfish. Eternal dust, less ticklish. Silverfish are the enemy of all record store owners and book lovers everywhere because they eat the sleeves of records.
Yep. And they love St. Louis. They're everywhere around here.
Okay, so next I picked Grace Jones' Warm Leatherette. And there was a couple of Grace Jones records, and I would have grabbed any of them, but I just liked this cover in particular. I think the best show I've ever seen was Grace Jones. My band Against Me played the Primavera Festival in Spain in 2017, and Grace Jones was one of the performers, and it was just a perfect day in general. Woke up there right on the coast, tour bus, got out, took a long walk down on the beach, ended up finding like these air gondolas that went over the city up to the top of a mountain, and at the top of the mountain there was like a little cafe, walked through these gardens, drank sangria all day, came down the mountain, took a rickshaw ride down the beach while eating ice cream with the rest of my bands, and got there right as Van Morrison was starting to play. Van Morrison was fucking incredible. And then Grace Jones played, and it was the most insane thing I've ever seen in my life. She had on like a white horse's mane, and half the set was just riding a security guard around on his shoulders. And like all of her in-between song stage banter was so on point and hilarious. And at the end of it, there's like confetti shooting into the air. It was fucking insane. It was one of the best days of my life.
She headline?
No, she probably played as the sun was going down too. I think the Arcade Fire might have been technically the headliner or whatever. Huh. But it was a pretty stacked lineup in general. Okay, I gotta keep it punk. So I chose Conflict. It's time to see who's who. English anarcho-peace punk had a huge influence on me, starting with the band Crass, Omega Tribe, The Mob, Sounds, Flux of Pink Indians, Poison Girls, all that stuff I lived and breathed for a period of time. And those were like the kind of like original wave of English peace punk bands. And then Crass broke up in 1984, and immediately following that, kind of Conflict came up. I think Conflict had a 7-inch on Crass Records, so they were already a band, but Steve Ignorant from Crass like would sing on and off with Conflict, which was how I got into Conflict. But they're just a classic English anarcho-peace punk band, and I will always love English anarcho-peace punk. There's this one song, I don't know if it's on this record, but it starts off with Conflict. But because of the British accent, me and my friends would always go, cornflakes. I actually had one that I wanted, okay, cool. Okay, so I feel like these are totally different artists, but somehow that these records go hand in hand for me. Leonard Cohen, You Want It Darker, and David Bowie, Black Star. And for both of these records, they're phenomenal records on their own, but what I think is really like remarkable about them is that they're both artists' last effort, last work, right? And of course I wish that everyone would live forever, don't get me wrong, but like to be able to look at an artist's body of work as a complete thing and see the complete arc and to see like a master stroke ending is so awesome. Mm-hmm. And Black Star in particular, it didn't hit me at first. But then, like, when it hit, it just, like, I could not stop listening to it. And same with, like, the record that came out right prior to this, the next day, that has the Heroes album artwork where they just, like, put the thing over it. I was like, oh, that's kind of a cop-out at first. And then I was like, oh, wait, no, it's fucking brilliant. But this record is fantastic. And this record, I highly also recommend picking up the book that Leonard Cohen did, his last like literary effort called The Flame, that I feel like is almost like a companion piece to this record. But I have a really vivid memory of the last time that I was in Amsterdam, right there in like the center of Amsterdam, in front of the American Hotel around the corner from my favorite hash cafe. And I remember sitting in the morning drinking coffee and listening to this record on my headphones, and it being just a really profound moment. So, love that record. It's deceiving at first for some reason when I look at this record, and maybe it's just because I've been like so inundated with a million different album covers and a different like packaging or whatever, where you look at it and the simplicity of it at first to me is a turnoff. I'm like, oh, it's called Black Star and there's a black star on the cover, whatever. But when you like really get into it, I don't know, it just hit me in a different way of like, oh, well, the simplicity is actually what's brilliant about it. And it's really nice packaging too. Like even like you can just feel the quality of that comes in, and it's really well done and thought out. And the band that plays on this record is a killer band. Okay, so I picked up a copy of Fleetwood Mac Tusk, and specifically this record for me, I will always tie to the pandemic, the beginning of the pandemic, the first year of the pandemic. I always slept on Tusk. I knew Rumors full and well, and I actually got in an argument with a friend of mine at the beginning of the pandemic where we were having the conversation of Desert Island Records, and they were like, Fleetwood Mac Tusk, and I was like, that's bullshit. You're gonna grab Tusk? No, you're not. You're gonna grab Rumors. If you're gonna grab any Fleetwood Mac record, you're gonna grab Rumors. It just didn't make sense to me, and then I admitted to myself, I've actually not spent much time with it, and I went and listened to it, and this is just a phenomenal record. I'm sure everyone else out there is like, yeah, no shit, it's Fleetwood Mac Tusk. But I really think that a lot of Lindsey Buckingham's songs on this particular are like proto-folk punk. They're just like that real simple like kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare beat, and like he's all pissed off and he's all fucking coked up and he's just like, it's great. It's really great. Now, I grabbed Eddie Grant, Killer on the Rampage, which does have Electric Avenue on it, which for me was reason enough, just because, I mean, fuck, if it's the apocalypse, it'd be cool to listen to Electric Avenue once in a while, you get yourself in a good mood. But really, I grabbed this record just as an excuse to talk about a band that Eddie Grant played in prior to being a solo artist called The Equals. And the Equals stuff is impossible to find. But I will buy Eddie Grant records whenever I see Eddie Grant records just because I love the Equals as much as I love the Equals. And even with the Equals, like you can find, it's hard to find like their full body of work, but the Equals are such a good band. And there's this one song in particular called Diversion, which is not on any of the streaming services. That's just, it's a bop, like the kids say. And I fucking love it as a pre-show warm-up song. So Eddie Grant, Killer on the Rampage. Okay, lastly, I picked Soft Cell, The Art of Falling Apart. And I love Soft Cell, Mark Allman, singer of Soft Cell, all of their solo work. Most people know Soft Cell for their hit Tainted Love, which is a great song, but they have such a catalog of music and so many more other interesting songs that I think it's a shame that they often get overlooked and aren't given total credit for the influence they've had, specifically even with fucking Nine Inch Nails. There's a Soft Cell song called Mr. Self-Destruct, and there's a Nine Inch Nails song called Mr. Self-Destruct, and there's a reason for that. And I think on this record, my favorite track is Loving You, Hating Me, but I love some Soft Cell. So those are the records I chose.